Hi there, folks. You're very welcome to a bonus episode of the Marketing for Consultants podcast. So this one's a little bit different. Normally I do interviews, and today I'm doing a solo recording. What I'm doing is I'm sharing something with you that I shared with my email list last week on Friday. So it is what I call a transparency update. And the logic behind this is I think that it's a good idea to, if you're open to it, to share some numbers from your business, and it can be good for accountability. It can be good to be authentic, and it can help with trust. I think there's a lot of positives of doing it. I got this concept from a guy called Rand Fishkin. He founded Moz. One of their mantras or mottos was, I think they call it tag fee. The T stands for transparency, A for authenticity, and I can't remember the rest of them. But yeah, so that's where I got this from. So I'm recording this both as a video, which will be on YouTube, and as a podcast episode, which will be on the podcast, obviously. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link into the YouTube video in the show notes for the podcast. And I'm also doing a screen share in the video. So you're listening to the podcast, I've got the numbers that I'm talking about, and it is actually showing up on the screen as I talk through them. Okay. The first thing I'm going to mention is that the total revenue to date for Marketing for Consultants is zero. And I can imagine some people raising some eyebrows at that, but there's actually nothing for sale right now. So there's no products or services, and that's going to change in this next quarter. And I'm going to talk to you about my 12-week year plan, which is a way that a technique I use for planning. It's a planning system. So I'll talk through that at the end of the numbers report. So total revenue to date for Marketing for Consultants is zero. I'm really very lucky in that my other brand, Website Doctor, it's really had a great year. And that's because we build websites, and we've had a lot of people going online because of COVID and the remote sales and everything. That is funding Marketing for Consultants totally at the moment. And hopefully there's going to be a shift in the pendulum, and Marketing for Consultants is going to take over as the primary revenue generator in the business. But for now, it's Website Doctors doing the heavy lifting there. Okay, so next number is email subscribers. So right now we're at 343. So 343 subscribers on the email list, and that is growing really slowly at about 5 to 10 per month. So that's something I want to do something about. The next number is reported open rate. So for email, you'll see in a lot of email systems it mentions the open rate. I like to call that reported open rate because it's not actually reporting all of the opens, it's just reporting the ones that it can see, that it can track. And actually Apple have made a big change recently, which means that number is going to drop because they're blocking the tracking for privacy reasons. That allows us to know if an email is being opened. So it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's good for privacy and it's bad for tracking. I'm really happy that right now the open rate is 36.7%, which is fairly high. I'm happy about that, but I know it's going to fall, so I might stop tracking it. If it starts falling, hopefully that will be because of privacy and not because people don't want to open my emails anymore. But for the moment, I'm still tracking that. And email is one of my big goals for the next quarter, so growing the email list. And one thing I'm going to do about that is I'm going to be adding more lead magnets, which are opt-in incentives, free gifts to incentivize people opting in. One of those is like a checklist, and another will be webinar, which I'll talk about. The next thing is the podcast subscribers. So right now, my podcast host is estimating that there are 61 subscribers, and I'll be honest, I'm a bit skeptical about that number. And the reason why is because I've also done some paid advertising, and the advertiser is reporting that there's more. So it's hard to know. So anyway, I'm gonna stick with the estimate from the podcast host as the number to track, because what that will do is that will just give me a trend. I'll be able to use that and see is the trend going up or not, even if the numbers are wrong. So I'll be able to use that. They're reporting that the podcast monthly downloads are 1,500, 1,526 to be specific. We now have 15 podcasts published episodes, and this will be number 16, I think. Yeah, the stats in podcasts are messy. It's really hard to know the exact numbers. For example, I think Spotify, they're reporting a number of followers as 15 in the Spotify system, and I don't know if that counts. I don't think it counts towards the subscription number, because I think that they don't cause a download. So yeah, it just gets a bit messy, but there are some numbers there to track. So the next thing is the advertising spend on the podcast is $720 in total so far. 520 of that is on Overcast, which is a podcast app that I love and recommend on Apple, on the iOS ecosystem. I advertised in 2 categories on Overcast, education and fiction, and that returned $6.53 per subscriber in the education category, which was 52 subscribers in total, and $12.86 in fiction, which is 14 subscribers in total. So obviously the education category there worked very well, and that's a pretty decent number per subscriber, I think. I've also spent another $200 on Podcast Addict, which is an Android podcast player. I haven't used it myself, but I was recommended to give it a go. Those aren't scheduled until July, which is 2 weeks after I'm recording this. So I won't know for another month or so how that goes. So we'll see what happens there. So that's a total advertising spend of $720, and then production spend on the podcast, and I'm going to estimate this as around $2,000, and it's hard to figure out the total cost here. I do have some real numbers. The audio editing is around $80 per episode. The show notes, this one is hard to guess, probably somewhere between $25 and $40 per episode. And the reason that's hard is because I have an assistant, Aiko, and so she's a full-time employee, and some of her time is spent every week is spent on this, and so it's hard to break it down specifically because I'm not paying just for that one task. There's also bookkeeping and all of that admin and social media and all of those other things, so it's really hard to just break this one thing down, but I would estimate somewhere in around that per episode of $25 to $40. The automated transcription is around $10 a month. The podcast hosting is around $30 a month, and the recording service is around $20 a month. So if we say there's 4 podcast episodes per month, that's around $150 per episode for production, not including my time. And that will make a rough estimate of around $2,000 so far. So the podcast has cost approximately $3,000 in total so far, very roughly. And again, not including my time. The flip side of that, there hasn't been revenue coming back from that, but I have developed relationships with a lot of really cool people, and I'm continuing to do that. So there's a big upside on that. So the next thing is my goals for the next year. I'm using the 12-week year system, and so in the video I'm going to switch over to my spreadsheet. If you're not watching the video, that's okay. I'm going to walk you through what's on here and what you can see. So there's my 4 goals that I've set. I actually had 5 and I've gotten rid of one of them. First one is I have created and run a webinar 3 times. And the reason for that is to build the email list to 1,000 subscribers. I don't know if I'll hit 1,000 subscribers, but the goal is to run that webinar, and running it several times will definitely increase the numbers. I want to write, so goal number 2 is I have written 20,000 words for the Marketing for Consultants book. So this is like a working title. It's not the real title. I'm working on my book. This will be my second book. I've written a book on WordPress before, but this is a book I'm much more interested in, which is marketing strategy for consultants. And so the reason for doing that is to develop my own expertise, to develop a book as a channel, to create an asset, an authority asset, and also it will also help with some other things like planning courses and things like that. I'm also very lucky. I've got a contract with a business publisher here in Ireland who are interested in the book, so that's a bit of incentive as well. Goal number 3 is contact 30 podcast hosts about appearing as a guest. So my goal is to grow the listenership of this podcast. And in order to get exposure, one big way to do that is to get on more podcasts. And so my goal is to hopefully get on 6 to 12 podcasts per quarter. And so I figure if I contact 30 hosts, then maybe I'll get on 6 podcasts from that. I don't really know what that kind of ratio will be yet. That's just going to be an experiment to see about that. Okay, and then the 4th goal is to have product ladder sales pages live, and I have 3 numbers here, 2.1, 2.3 and 2.35. Those numbers are actually referring to 3 different products in another spreadsheet, and 2.1 is the entry level product. It's actually a lead magnet. It's free, so it's a free download, and then 2.3 and 2.35 are related to each other, so that's why the numbers are the same. One is a variation of another product where there's also a coaching call. I want to have those product sales pages live so that if somebody decides that they want to work with me, that they can actually go and purchase those. And so it's important to have those for revenue. So that's why that goal is there. So those are the 4 goals: create and run the webinar 3 times, 20,000 words, contact 30 podcast hosts, and have these 3 product sales pages live. And you might have noticed that there's a couple of things about these goals that I've written. They're very specific. They're also all lead goals. What that means is they're all things that I control. So if my goal is to build the email list to 1,000 subscribers, I can't control that. But I can control if I run the webinar 3 times. I can't control if I get on 6 podcasts, but I can control how many podcast hosts I contact. So that's the logic there. I like using lead goals like that. And I've also written the goals in the form of I have done this, as in it's been successful. So that's, I think in part that is psychology, just to get you to visualize the thing being done, the goal being done. And also it helps keep it very specific. So I also track some other metrics in the 12-week year. I track the number of subscribers. I'm going to be tracking it every week. My number of LinkedIn connections, the number of podcast episodes I've published. And I also track the number of emails in my inbox, because I try to get it down as close to 0 to get to that inbox 0 on a regular basis. So there's some of the things that I just track there. And yeah, so that is my planning for the 12-week year. And that is my transparency update. I hope you find that useful. I'd love to hear your feedback on this. Let me know what you think. If you think I'm missing something, or you would change or do something different. And I'd also love it if you like the podcast. I'd love to hear that. Let me know what you think about it. Thanks for listening or watching, and talk to you next time.